So continues the newspaper review. Of course, we were looking at the headlines, but right now we were referring to the pictures on the headline, which is a little bit about yesterday's protest, and we're talking about politics, protests, and the youth. Willis Misare, Lawrence Mureithi, continuing to remain with me for the next 10 minutes or so as we wind up this discussion, because Cheche is up next. Let me come to you, Lawrence. And yesterday, even as we saw protests on the streets of Nairobi, we know that there was another form of protest on social media. Let's talk a bit about the power of that, the impact of that, the effectiveness in the political dispensation that we are currently in.
Thanks, Maura. Let me start by saying that the social media and new technologies, by far and large, will form a big platform for governance and mobilization moving forward. And I think the youth particularly need to take advantage of this, need to take advantage of the fact that there are platforms that allow for interaction, sharing of ideas and ideologies, and coming together so as to shape the direction that the country takes moving forward.
What do you say to those who feel that so-called online protesters are simply hiding? They don't want their identity to be known. Why don't they just go to the streets and actually carry out those protests the traditional way?
Well, yes, and some have even been called keyboard warriors. But I think, Maura, that's being unfair, because also you realize that this brings a much bigger platform for people to interact, even those in the diaspora, those far out, in the villages, and so, Maura, I believe moving forward, and particularly for the youth, like I said, this is a platform that we should take advantage of and shape the direction that our politics move going forward.
Okay, Willis?
Yeah, I want to say that social media campaigns, social media protests, as they have been called, there are instances where they've made a lot of impact outside the country and even within the country. Why I think our political protests on social media do not make enough difference is that they degenerate into fights from amongst ourselves. Our youth will have a very good idea, start a campaign online, but then what happens? It becomes a fight. It becomes a NASA versus Jubilee fight, even if it was just a youth agenda that we should all, we should all support. But then we take our political stance, and then it becomes a fight. It doesn't unite us. Instead, it even brings more division against us.
Okay.
So social media protests, they have their small impact politically. But in other spheres of our engagements, where politics is not involved, we've seen the power of social media,
okay,
and the impact it can have.
Power and impact of social media. Okay, so I see some differences between how we do things here in Kenya and internationally. For example, internationally, you've seen protests using hashtags like Occupy, whether it's Hong Kong or Wall Street or whatever it is. But mainly what you see is that those driving that engagement are actually on the streets. They are posting pictures of their activities, etc. Here in Kenya, it's like we have two different groups of youth. One group is willing to go out there and do the dirty work. The other group is content just to sit back and tweet. What would happen if the group that are online actually went out there to raise their issues while at the same time tweeting as well? Would that cause a marked difference, Lawrence?
Thanks, Maura. And we're having this discussion, I believe, over the break. And I think history will judge the youth pretty harshly, especially in Kenya, because we're not bold enough and we're not taking bigger initiatives to drive democracy, to drive political inclusion. And I think what needs to be done, and the social platform provides a broad platform for such engagements, is that the youth need to get off their seats and get moving. And we all share the same ideologies. I believe we all want a brighter future for ourselves and for the generation that will come after us. We all want to have environment that is conducive for business, for growth, both politically, economically, socially. But what happens is, in most instances, the youth are not willing to actually make the sacrifice, both personal and social, I believe. And that's, I think, where that's where the conversation needs to go.
Okay, that's where the conversation needs to go. Willis, let me switch gears a little bit. When you see young people burning tires on Thika Superhighway or in Kibera or in different parts of the country, do you think they are aware of how the activities are eventually going to paint the country in a negative light, maybe eventually leading to investors shying away from coming to Kenya to create jobs that could employ these same young people? Are they aware of the wider impact of their protests and activities, even though it is their constitutional right to do so?
A large number of those that are on the streets are aware of why they're on the streets. The other segment, there are people who are on the streets, but they do not even know why they are on the streets. They do not know why they are protesting. They are there for the euphoria. They have nothing to do. So when they get something that to do, you know, make them feel happy or something, they join into this protest. But I'm sure that a large number knows what they are taking part in. And Maura, what you've just raised of painting the nation in bad light, you know, sending away investors, I don't think we should look at it from that perspective. If we manage to resolve the issues that are leading to these demonstrations and burning of tires, then I'm sure these demonstrations will not be a daily thing, and these investors will stay. And even from where these investors come from, we are seeing what's going on in the US now, the Antifa demonstrations, the white supremacists and everything.
Yes. Some
of these investors come from these countries. These things happen in their countries. So there are things they understand. There are things that, if allowed to go on for a long time, that's when the impacts can be felt. So if as a nation we are going to be honest with each other and allow processes to take place as they ought to be without trying to manipulate them, thereby sending people into the streets to demand for the right thing to be done, then I think having issues with the sending away investors and things like that should not arise.
Okay, Lawrence, I can give you just 30 seconds to also respond to this because we need to wind up.
Yes, I want to say, Wahiga, that the opposition has not once had a peaceful demonstration, not once. And I would want my friend Willis here to show me if there's such a case. And so it is,
although you're not, and that's the reason why. Question.
And that is the reason why you find that even the business community, not just the ones that were on the streets yesterday, but even those others that were not the Asian community, if you go to them, and the bigger sort of population within the cosmopolitan Nairobi would be against these demonstrations because, as you rightly put it, it paints the country in bad light, and of course over time it even impacts on the larger economies of the country. This is, and allow me to say this is simply because if the protestants, if the demonstrations were peaceful, they were done in the right and the democratic and constitutional way, I don't think anyone would have a problem. But these demonstrations are just, sort of the politically correct word of vandalism and thuggery, and that's actually what is the problem.
Okay.
Mike, if I might just respond shortly.
Briefly, please.
He said that there have never been peaceful opposition demonstrations. A day before the declaration of the fake results that were now nullified by the Supreme Court, I was in Kisumu and we had peaceful demonstrations. We saw peaceful demonstrations in Kisumu yesterday, which has always been known as the bedrock of violent protest. What I want to say clearly is this. All protests, mostly because protests have mainly been by the opposition, are always peaceful until the police overstep their mandate and start to engage people in running battles.
Thank you, Willis. That's how I'm going to have to wind up because our time is up. At least I've given you a few minutes just to respond to what Lawrence had to say. Thank you so much to everyone who's written in as well. Again, a discussion that clearly we will need to have again, and maybe I'll find another opportunity to bring my panelists back to continue to talk about the youth and the role of youth in politics and protests, even as our country finds ourselves in very interesting political times. Let me read some of your feedback here. Evans, you don't tell us where you're writing from, but to say, hi Wahiga, I was part of the Mandamano yesterday, and there was nothing we benefited, as it has been said. We as youths want to be part of the change. And then he winds up by saying Chiloba has to go. Somebody else here, Paul from Meru, says, most of them want chaos to erupt so that they can loot innocent wananchi. To some it has become like a profession. The police must do everything to keep peace and protect property. And then David from Nairobi says, hi Mwaura, there is a video on social media about the youth saying that for demos to be successful there must be tear gas. So where are our youth heading to? That's how we wrap up the discussion. Thank you so much to my guests.